Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting edge strategies to keep teams human centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your teams excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane Groeneveld, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. Are you struggling to attract and retain top talent? Today's episode explores building a company culture that empowers employees and fosters success. We're joined by Leslie Vickrey, a trailblazer in the talent business and an advocate for women in technology. Leslie is not only the founder of ClearEdge, a company revolutionizing talent through marketing, recruiting, and leadership, but also a co-founder of ARA, an initiative dedicated to advancing women in tech. In this episode, Leslie shares her journey as an entrepreneur, discussing her mission to build a company that supports families and empowers women to climb the corporate ladder. She'll delve into how businesses can help women and families, foster community, and develop a compelling company why to stand out in a sea of sameness. We'll also hear insights from Dane, who emphasizes the critical role of flexible workplace policies. He highlights the importance of policies that prioritize time for family, personal development, and the things that matter most to everyone. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane Groeneveld, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group, and today I'm joined by Leslie Vickrey. Leslie is the CEO and founder of ClearEdge, and ClearEdge is transforming the business of talent through marketing, recruiting, and leadership development services. So it's going to be fun diving in. Welcome, Leslie.
Oh, Dane, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today.
You bet. So for the benefit of our listeners, could you provide us a little bit more of your story and what brought you to be founding ClearEdge and doing the great work that you all do?
Sure. I would love to tell the story. It's going back some time. We've had ClearEdge, it'll be 18 years in June when I started the company. But going on my professional side, I never really envisioned myself being an entrepreneur, really, and starting my own company. My dreams were to be a journalist. I love writing. That's kind of my passion. And I went to school for journalism and PR and all of the things. And several years later, after doing internal communications and marketing and so forth, I kind of found an opportunity, I would say, in that it seemed like companies could use outsourced marketing and were perhaps underinvesting in marketing. And as they were underinvesting, I thought, gosh, if they just took the salary of the head of marketing or a couple of the roles, they could outsource it, align it to the business, have that kind of fractional CMO thinking and fully integrated marketing, and went off on my own and started a company. I realized years later, I was speaking to a DePaul University entrepreneurial class, and I always get asked the question, did you always know you wanted to be? And I think that's a funny thing. I don't know if that happened to you either, but I did not always
No.
know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. However, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My grandmother and her sisters had opened up clothing stores when they came over from Lebanon and were in the Detroit area back in the day. And I grew up in the stores, seeing them, at work and the value of customer service and what it's like to run a company. But it never dawned on me that that's something I would want to do. I do, however, think it made it easier for me to do it because it didn't feel like a huge risk to me to do that. It just felt like a natural thing you do. So didn't know I always wanted to be, but now I wouldn't change it for the world. So yeah, ClearEdge, 17, almost 18 years. And now, as you mentioned, with three divisions of the company, marketing, recruiting, and rising.
And tell me a little bit more about how Rising came about, because it's such a cool name for an offering.
Oh, thank you. We, for me, being purpose driven has always been something that was important since founding ClearEdge. And at the time when I started the company, I don't know that I realized it necessarily when we were hiring people and starting to make a difference in the lives of the talent and people we were working with, that everyone had a reason for why they were coming to ClearEdge. And
Hmm.
Simon Sinek, it's always like, what's that why? And I could never put my finger on our why. And we had tried for a long time. And we're a marketing and branding agency. And, over the years, we would come, there's a feeling that we had. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, what that feeling was, it was this purposeful action, which was to rise other people up. So when growing the company, I didn't have funding. I didn't, I was actually trying to convince people to work with me on contract, as we were growing the company. And what I realized was people were coming to us. One, we had a virtual model. And, 17 years ago, that wasn't a thing, but people would come to me, and one person in particular, Kathy Dooley, who was on our team, she said, my corporate job won't give me flexibility, and I need to take care of my parents. Her father had late stages Alzheimer's, and he and her mom lived in Florida, and she lived up in Massachusetts. And she said, I'd like to spend half the year in Florida and half the year in Massachusetts. Could I work with you? And, what do you think? And I just kept saying yes to these situations where it could be a parent with special needs children who their job wouldn't give them an opportunity, or and they needed that flexibility. I would say yes. Or a mom who wanted to keep working, but their job wouldn't give them the flexibility to do that, and they wanted to work part-time. I would say yes. What we were building was this why, which was to rise people up. And over the years, what that ended up turning into was me realizing, a lot of times it was rising women up. And I co-founded a company with two of my very good friends, Megan McCann and Jane Hamner, called ARA, Attract, Retain, and Advance Women in Technology. We have about 6,000 people who have been part of the program over the years. And again, it was to rise up women. I looked at our company, our why, literally written out, is rising up. When it came time for us to launch a division where we were trying to rise more women into leadership roles and on boards, it became natural. The very first thing I did, and we did a whole naming exercise, all of these things, but the very first thing I said was, it's ClearEdge Rising. It's rising. It's our why. It's our purpose. We've done that since the day we founded the company. We've helped people, rise up in their careers and their lives and give them opportunities others wouldn't. How do we, now we're creating a division where we want to see more women in the C-suite and more women on boards. Of course, it's got to be rising. So that was kind of a long way to,
Yeah.
to say what it is, but ultimately it's a career accelerator for women in business. And how can we move the needle for the statistics, I'll just use the recruiting industry. That's one example. It's over almost 60% women in entry level positions. It drops to about
Yeah.
20% in the C suite and 4% women of color. And you have to ask yourself why, what happens in that middle gap area. And for me, I've spent so much time on panels talking about DE&I and rising women up. I co-founded a company on it. And I felt like, gosh, we have these great conversations, have these podcasts, and people walk away inspired, wanting to make change. But what do we what can we really do to support the individual and the company to help them make a difference?
Hmm.
So the company have succession plans, have, more thought around what they're doing in that area, support the women in their companies, be a company women want to work for from a recruiting standpoint, drive some purpose behind
Yeah.
their own business. And then for the individual woman, why are they dropping out? Or why don't they have the confidence to be their own, best champion and advocate? What can we do to support them on that journey to get into those higher
Mm.
levels? So that was really the premise behind Rising. So a little different marketing agency turned into career accelerator, but at the end of the day, it all goes to the Rising concept.
Which is awesome.
Thank you.
And it's awesome. And it makes a lot of sense. You hear people talk about, hey, if we're truly living our purpose through our employees, then our customers are going to feel it. So I'm sensing that's what you're seeing every day across all of your offerings.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for us, when we say transform the business of talent, it's, really working on if it's our recruiting division where we're helping companies bring in incredible, marketing talent and staff their marketing teams, we're making an impact for the person who is looking for a change in their career. We're rising up on both sides. And it just
Yeah.
feels like, again, over the years, trying to find that purpose. It finally hit us that it's this rise up. It's a feeling that we all deeply have as a unit in our company that we want others to have that experience as well.
And saying yes. I mean, you talked about flexibility, but one of the very basic and simple explanations of why there aren't women in as many of the senior leadership roles is that companies weren't good at saying yes. They said, well, if you're taking a break to care for children, well, you're naturally going to fall behind your peers. And so that's changed a lot in the last 10, 20 years with technology and flexibility. But we're still not there. So when you're working with female executives, with leaders in businesses that are really committed to driving up the representation of women in these leadership roles, are there key practices, key themes, key trends that you see that make them stand out, those that are actually achieving the lift?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, you need to look at your familial practices. Like, what do you have as policies within your company, and how are you supporting families? And for all parents within a company to take advantage of those policies and offerings, where dads also, quite frankly, feel empowered to take the time
Yeah.
and set really that example for other people on the team to do the same thing. Because it isn't just women who take the time. We need that support system. I had someone say to me once when I had our son, Grayson, he's almost 8. And they said, well, why would men need more than 2 weeks off? They, they're not, the ones who carried the baby and went through birth and did all these things. They could come right back. And for me, it was, well, I'm an entrepreneur and I run a company. And even if I didn't, I need the help. Women, moms, we need the help too. Everyone needs the help. So even if it's a
Yeah.
policy where the dad takes 2 weeks in the beginning and then it's given another 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever the policy is later when the mom goes back to work or the parent goes back to work, whatever that looks like, it starts a lot with policies. Do I feel like I can be successful in this company if or when I decide to have a
Hmm.
family? And, so it goes down to, again, the culture that and the questions you have to ask yourself when joining a company or looking at a company. And then how are you willing to advocate for yourself and ask for the things that you maybe need? Before it was like, don't call them, disconnect them while they're on leave, don't have any communication. Well, ask me because, quite frankly, I may be okay with that. I may need that or want that. And have that conversation in advance, during, and coming back, make it really successful for families to be able to be successful in their career. You can see too with the pay gap and pay wage situations, pay equity, inequities.
Yeah.
It's called the mom tax, the mother tax. It does start when you decide to have a family, and it's amazing when you look at the statistics where you can see at what age even you decide to start to have a family, how you'd be impacted. So for me, I didn't have Grayson until I was
Yeah.
43. So I never had a break taking 3, 4 kids in my career, during the times where a
Hmm.
lot of people are having families, I wasn't. So in my case, I could keep my earning potential going. So again, you've got to look at that and say, my gosh, how is that fair? To the person and people having a family, what can you do as a company, an employer, to make your business a place moms and families want to be and work and feel like they can be successful? The other thing I would say I'm still seeing, Dane, is, moms dropping out of companies because of the flexibility issue. So, which is, it's
Mm.
unfortunate when you look at why there aren't more women in the C suite, childcare, things of that nature, and just flexibility. Um, However, when you think of that flexibility piece, now with companies reverting and saying, we want you in the office, it does become
Yeah.
challenging. And I look at it and I still can't believe I had people early on when we started ClearEdge who would say, wait, really? I don't need to work while I'm on vacation, or I can go to my daughter's play or my son's game that happens to be in the middle of the day. And I'm like, of course, why would you? I didn't know
Yeah.
that was a thing that people would miss it, quite frankly. I was super naive.
Yeah.
So I kept saying yes because I thought, well, that's the human thing to do. Like, of course, you should be there for your kids. And by the way, your kids want you there, to see it. And now, as a parent going through it, like we have Coco with the kids tomorrow morning, and I've got to look at my
Hmm.
schedule and make sure I block time to go for Coco with Grayson, and it's only 30 minutes in the morning, but it's part of the day. And, it could be anything from talent shows to whatever it is. You need that flexibility. And when you're, told, no, you've got to drive an hour each way to get to the office and be there
Yeah.
during these set hours and not have that flexibility, it makes it hard for parents, period. But then when you throw in, well, the dad possibly makes more than the mom, it's the mom who ends up struggling and suffering career wise because
Yeah.
then you start to weigh things like childcare cost and say, well, I
Yeah.
make more, therefore, here. Um, so anyway, for me, and I talk about this a lot, I do think it starts at home and this equality piece where, both parents can look at how they each are there for each other within the family unit at home and within their careers. And
Yeah.
I also host a podcast called The Edge. And I remember recording 5 episodes in a row, and The Edge, it's about executive women in recruitment, featuring them and their stories. And the intention was there were a lot of women who were in C-suite or, senior level positions who were basically running these companies who no one knew. No one knew that they were there. So if you're the only in a
Hmm.
company, you don't know the possibilities of what you can do if you don't see it within your own company. So I wanted them to share their stories, but Dane, it was fascinating. I think it was about 5 in a row. The husbands were stay-at-home dads. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm
Yep.
seeing these trends here. And what it dawned on me is that no one even would talk about that. And I'd have to pull it out and then ask questions and look at that. But it really does, how can you start at home looking at these things and, make a difference for your family and then look at that whole purpose piece. What do you want to get out of your life and your career? And is the
Yeah.
company you're with the one who can give that to you? And if they're not, have you told them and, tried because you love the company? But if it's just not part of their DNA, then you just have to say, I'm going somewhere else or I'm making a choice to stay. And if you make the choice to stay, it's your choice and your decision, but you need to know, the kind of consequences of that, I guess. That was a long answer. Did I even answer
Yeah.
your question?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit so
You're like, let me go back
no,
to that note. I
you
don't
hit
know.
so many good points. You hit so many good points. You're keeping me on my toes, Leslie, because now I've got to dive back into them. But one of the early points that you hit on, family policies, parental policies, was uh, I heard it as tone setting. Hey, we should have a company culture where it's expected that our men will take time off, whether that's to create a sense of acceptance across the organization that when our female colleagues take their time, that it's normal, or B, that they're providing support to their partner who may be a female executive as well. So there's almost like do do right for the company and do right for the community at the same time. So that's a different edge that I haven't really heard a lot of, but it makes a lot of sense the way you explained it.
Yeah. It changed. I mean, think about just in your friend groups, if you talk about things like
Yep.
that, if I'm the male and I'm saying, oh, I'm taking off 2 weeks and then, Leslie's going back to work and then I'm going to take off time from there. It's you're part of that family and part of
Yep.
giving of that time. But then the other men and women start to hear those stories too and say, oh my gosh, I didn't do that. Maybe I should have done that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that with our next kid. Or gosh, I should talk to my company about that policy and say, here's what this is. And I have to tell you, we're not perfect either. We are just updating our policy and plan and rolling it out. And I remember when we had Grayson, my husband's company, they only gave 2 weeks and for him. And I remember
Yeah.
it was because, and you know, the founders were in their 20s who didn't have kids were they weren't even
Yeah.
married. Kids were not on their mind. It was a tech startup. And he was the oldest at the time. He would have been in his late 30s, mid 30s. He was the oldest executives in the company. And he was the only one really having kids.
Hmm.
So he had to go to them and say, we really should change this policy and let's look at it. And the founders were like, you're right. We should. They hadn't thought about it. So, we've got to give grace to people too and
Yeah.
realize we're all learning and growing and policies are changing. If you think of, people who can't get pregnant, and if you go through any kind of
Yep.
IVF treatment or different things, you're going to need extra time. And you're going to need flexibility. If you
Yep.
are adopting, if you, whatever that is, looking at your policies today with a completely different lens, because, families, units have changed and the way in which we
They
have
have.
children have changed and evolved. And we're actually more open to talking about it and becoming more comfortable with it. And it's hard times, for people. What if, God forbid, you have a miscarriage? A
Yeah.
friend of mine on my podcast, I think she said 7 miscarriages, 7 miscarriages.
Oof.
What do you do as a company?
Yeah,
Like,
that takes a
this is a
huge toll.
senior executive, and mentally where your head is and what's happening, and we've got to be there for each other. And something you said earlier, it's that kind of human side. So the policies are always changing
Yeah.
and evolving, and you've got to do what's right for your company. And that's where we're constantly looking at it like, oh gosh, we support rising and all of these things. Are we supporting the families in our company? Do we have the right policies in place? So, even we're taking a hard look at that and changing things up too.
Which is important. I had a guest on the show, Leanne Davey came on, and we were talking about the fact that talent is human, right? So if you just think about talent in the context of what tasks they perform and what results do they get in the business, then you're not truly honoring who they are as humans. And let's be honest, they can't sustain the time and energy that they give you if you're not allowing them to sustain good, healthy practices at and away from work. So I've probably gone from one of those people who used to look at things like pet adoption policies,
Right.
as saying, "Hey, we're going a little bit far now," to actually coming back and saying, "Well, whatever it is that's important to that person, how do we create that flexibility?"
Yes.
Because people are going to make different choices, but everyone has a finite amount of time and energy, and we've got to protect that quite fiercely, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. That's a great example.
The other point that you touched on in there was being an entrepreneur. You were able to say yes. In fact, maybe you had to say yes because you were trying to attract this talent in, and that was
Right.
the talent you could get at that time. I wonder how much there's a lot of talk out there in the industry right now around, do you trade stability working for a large corporate for risk going into a small business model? But you yourself shared, hey, you weren't afraid of starting your own business because you'd seen aunts, grandmothers running clothing stores. You stepped in, and then with a blank sheet of paper, you created a new model. I wonder if there's a story here that we should see more entrepreneurship as the edge that drives better practices and better opportunities for people in our communities wanting to do their best work.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting point. We used to do a survey for the women in tech company I co-founded, and when we would ask
Yeah.
women why they were leaving technology, uh, the top reasons were unfair policies and work environments and not an opportunity for upward mobility and different things of that nature. And then the next question will be, well, what are you doing now? And entrepreneurship was a huge component. And I look at a lot of
It
my
is.
friends in the last year who have left their corporate jobs for various reasons. It could be, downsizing or other personal reasons, or that they just left, now starting their own companies. And you can make a decision, when you're doing that to change things. And I would argue, going to a large company today, look at in the news all the mass layoffs and different things that have happened, and I look at friends who um, are so worried about that next job they take because what if I make the wrong decision and I go to another company and then something else happens? I'm going to look like a job hopper. And it's like out of their control. You don't really know what the company is going to be like until you get in there. It could be a big company, but your smaller team. It feels like a, a startup within a big company, or it could be a startup that you feel like is really well funded and you go in and next thing you know, they didn't know what they were doing and it's not so well funded, or they're getting acquired within a year. You didn't realize that, so it's like the risk reward varies depending on a lot of different factors. But I did find it fascinating that a lot of people we surveyed, like after leaving environments where they were just done, they were starting their own companies.
Yeah, which is exciting. And I think if people are starting again with their purpose in mind, it's
Hmm.
creating and introducing a lot more opportunity for people,
Hmm.
whether it's in their field of work or in their local community. I saw a stat the other day that said neighborhoods with an increase of 10% in work from home professionals are seeing a 4% reduction in crime, like burglary
Mm.
in the homes. And I challenged the post and said, is it because it was suggesting it was because there's more um, people observing what's going on in the neighborhood and calling out suspicious activity. And the human in me was like, maybe, but wouldn't it be nice if the story was actually 10% of work from home workers, whether entrepreneurs or not, are now spending more money and time in their local community, which means that people are finding jobs and finding economic vitality that wasn't there before when people were driving to other cities to do their work. So the community impact, I think, is real. I don't think we've fully seen it yet, but I think the more we see entrepreneurship and flexible work practices, I expect we're going to see better practices at a community level too.
I would think so, 100%. You are spot on with that.
Building on the entrepreneurship, there's obviously the go out and start your own business, but you mentioned fractional earlier, Leslie. So are you seeing that, in the greater scheme of things, if a female executive's leaving a job or a work environment that they don't like, is fractional a career pathway, or is it a staging post, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dana. I think for us with fractional, it can be, if you think about the way we look at it, we've been providing outsourced CMO services for 17 years. And basically, the company gets,
Hmm.
the percentage of time they need of the CMO that they need to have. And that's what they're paying for instead of full time. We've now thrown the word fractional in front of it, and it could be fractional anything in the C suite. And it's a thing now. It's been around for a long time. It's just called something
Yeah.
different now. And I think it does offer people an opportunity, however, coming out of corporate to be more, or just coming out of a full time one job, kind of that gig economy work mindset that wow, I could work two fractional CMO jobs or four, and I may even make more money than I would if I were working for full time, but I can
Hmm.
set my own schedule. And because we've seen more of a shift in people working that model over the most recent years, people on the fractional side are more open to it. And companies realize
Yeah.
too, they might say, I need that CMO. Well, now they're saying, gosh, do I really need that CMO? I need it, but do I need it full time? I need the business aligned to marketing. I need, someone to help rise up my talent because maybe no one else in the company gets marketing. So their marketing teams need mentorship and growth and opportunity and to learn from someone. So, but perhaps I don't need it full time yet. And maybe I'll end up needing it full time.
Yep.
So if I start fractional, I can go into the full time. So it's a nice opportunity of flexibility all around for the person and the company where they can really see the value out of marketing that they should see by aligning it to the business and helping again if they have the other team build their marketing team, build that presence. And it gives the individual an opportunity to keep doing what they love, but do it on their own time
Yep.
and, consider I'm going to try working at this company and see if it's a good fit. And if so, I'm going to advocate that, it'd be great to work there, there full time. So yeah, it can make a big
Yeah.
difference.
And
Dane, I want to go
and
back
that's
on
real
you
too.
on, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go.
No, keep going. That's real too.
I was just going to say what fascinates me about that fractional model, and then we'll come back to your question. But what fascinates me about that fractional model is that it may actually create a bit of a springboard. If you're a director or a VP of marketing in a large company and you're not going to make the C-suite because it's a massive company and it's a long journey and there's people ahead of you, and you go into a fractional role and you start working with more small businesses, you learn, actually, I've got a lot of talent that maybe I wasn't utilizing in my last role because I was pigeonholed in a big team. And B, you get the experience to try some different companies, almost try before you buy, like you were saying. You
Yes.
get to see who you might enjoy working for before you jump in with 2 feet. So that almost feels like a springboard or an accelerator for leaders to step into a more executive level role without having to climb that ladder. It's, that there's all
Yes.
sorts of shapes and sizes of teams out there, and your experience today can obviously be more than what it might be valued at where you're at.
Right. It's a really excellent point. And it's funny, I hear, I'll talk to people who will say, gosh, I'd really like that CMO job or CEO job or COO job, but I didn't have that title before. And I keep thinking to myself, well, find that company who's looking for a rising CEO or a rising COO or willing to
Yes.
give someone a chance. And to your point, they can get that experience in multiple fractional roles and actually gain that title pretty quickly instead of having to take that, feel like they can't do it. It can help build their confidence by doing it as well. So, yeah, I love that view on it.
Very cool. No, I think that's one that we will do a little bit more research on together following the show. So you had a question for me, Leslie. Let's let you throw
Well,
me in the hot seat for a minute.
I actually wanted to just dive into something you said about the communities and making change. There's a group called Icy Stars. You may be familiar with them. I think I had introduced them a while back. Sandy Castro is the founder. They do inner
Yeah.
city. They take inner city adults and they kind of immerse them in technology training and then they help on the job placement front. So get them the experience they need. And there's a stat they have on the website about you can go from, quite frankly, I sat on the board and volunteered for many, many years. You could go from being homeless to legitimately being able to afford a home and like buying a home. And the
Hmm.
intention was through education and work we weren't trying to take them out of their communities. We were trying to help them build their communities. So, how could they make a change and a
Yeah.
difference, in having this experience by investing in their community? To your point, so it's how do we make communities better through flexibility, offering reskilling, upskilling, helping people find jobs. It all
Hmm.
comes back together and rebuilding that community. But I was thinking about that as you mentioned the piece on the crime piece, and I think you're right. There's another lens there that we need to make, which is giving people that opportunity. If it's flexibility, if it's job training, if it's just quite frankly give someone an opportunity, in their career, it can make a big difference on crime in communities and that organization is one of many
Hmm.
kind of focused on that. But that's where we can really make a difference. So I just wanted to say I appreciated your kind of spin on that and take on it, where it wasn't necessarily because people were in their homes and home, that hopefully it's because there's a lot of programs now and things that people can do to, give back to their communities. And one is work, helping people, make an income and so forth. So have that stability.
Yeah. I think that's really important. We actually, I think that's how we met. We started a foundation, the Team Up Foundation, and it's all about
Yes.
bridging people into career pathways through learning, development, connection, you name it. Because sometimes it's not even about reskilling; it's just giving someone that opportunity, as you stated it.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's really powerful because there's not only a economic means, but there's also just feeling like a contributing member of the community,
Yes.
feeling connected to your community, and we've we've at times let that slip, and
Yep.
it's different from place to place. But I think now more than ever, particularly with phones and social media and Netflix, it's easy for people to become disassociated. So I
Yes.
think the
I
workplace
agree.
done well is a great place to rebuild that association,
Yeah, I agree.
which is fun and rewarding.
Yep. 100%.
Neat. Um, so we've talked a good extent around building purpose, around rising female leaders and leaders of any nature, but particularly female leaders. We've talked a lot about the parental policies and flexibility um, that can help any business move in that direction. Where I'm interested to dive in, particularly given you've got the marketing expertise, is you mentioned Simon Sinek earlier. He's very popular, but it's really easy to kind of do a why statement of Apple and Apple's products on a
Right.
whiteboard. But if you're a small business, landing your why is really hard. And then even if you land it, being able to synthesize it in a way that speaks to others is equally hard. So, do you have any tips, tricks, best practices for teams out there in going through that discovery process?
Sure, I sure do because we had to do it ourselves. So, after 17 years in business, we just updated and launched a new brand for ClearEdge, and it took us kind of using our own process that we use on clients. We used on ourselves. So I became the client, and for us, it's a combination. Everyone has something special. So when you can look at go to market messages and strip out the company logo or name and put them all up on a board and try to figure out who belongs where to which description. And what you'll find is they all sound the same. We call it the sea of sameness. And usually it's because they haven't taken
Yeah,
the time to really talk to and do some qualitative interviews and analysis of the people who are their raving fans. So we talk to clients, we talk to employees, we talk to candidates, we talk to partners, industry leaders, people who know the company, and we interview them to really get under the covers of what stands out for this company. What really is that the why? Why do you work with them? Why do you stay at the company? Why are you
yeah,
intrigued by them? What makes them unique and special? And then we take all of that data and bring it back together and we present back to companies, what that looks like for them. And you don't have to use an agency to do that, but it's taking the time to understand everyone's why behind it. So if it's just the executive team trying to do it, you're not probably going to be able to find it. But if you have other people and really you want to hear
no,
from people outside of the company, your clients and your partners and people who admire you, why? What is their why for wanting to work with you or partner with you, and getting under the covers of that and then putting together and synthesizing that messaging and the why. So we did the why statement, we did a rally cry, we did obviously the one liner of who we are and all of those things. And we just did it for a client the other day, and we now it's like they are brought to tears because in all the years they've
yeah,
been in business, they've never had someone be able to find their why. And when they do, it's like I told you earlier, like we could all feel it, but it was finding those words that describe it was really important to do that. So it's just taking the time to go through that process. It's so rewarding. One, it rallies your internal team tremendously. because
Yeah.
they live and breathe it and feel it. And then they're part of that process and feel really behind it. And then, two, when clients see it, they get excited because it resonates with them and they are your best advocates.
Yeah.
So they're saying, yes, this makes perfect sense. Yes, this is, you've captured it so beautifully. And, they really helped you get to that point. So just taking the time to ask the right questions and qualitatively understand the why from all of the important audiences is a really critical step that's often overlooked.
I think you make a really good point there as well on engaging the customers, vendors, other people through a non-power wielding entity, whether that's an agency or partner or a team member. Uh, that's really encouraging. One of my mentors shared a quote with me the other day. He said, "Questions hold the lanterns that light the way." And
Yes, I
I
love
think
that.
all too often we fail to ask enough questions, and
Yes.
so the exercise in and of itself seems to hold a lot of value.
I'm writing that down. That's a good one. Yeah, that's great.
It's great. It hit me and I was just like, "Wow,
Yeah,
yeah, you're absolutely right." Because it's too easy to get a few executives in a room and they all brainstorm what they think, and it's in a vacuum and it's lost on everyone who
right.
reads it, when it's finally produced.
But we talk about diversity, diversity of thought is so important. And
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why
yeah,
diversity is so important. Your executive team could all be the same and not have a lot of
yeah,
diverse thought. And you may have a dynamic where people know, well, whatever the CEO founder says kind of goes. So, you just don't know what that
yeah.
dynamic will be. So, by kind of letting go as the founder and saying, I'm open to this process and hearing what people have to say, for me, it was extraordinarily eye opening. It was fantastic.
And it looks great. So for anyone out there who is trying to land that purpose, that why for their team, and integrate it into their ways of working, um, I think Leslie, you've made a really strong case for it. Where do you think that that kind of opportunity is right now? Is it something that is easier to do in smaller businesses than larger businesses just because there's less bureaucracy, there's less existing living brands out there in the community? Do you think there's a movement right now where we're going to see more purposeful businesses in a certain size or sector?
I think it's really, and I'll just use us as an agency. We're working with companies of all sizes on it, where I see it as
Yeah,
actually a moment in time where, when you're coming out of a downturn market and you want to be ahead, people invest. Companies who are
yeah,
looking to be ahead and are open to investing, they invest in their why, they invest in their brand, and they know when the market turns that they're going to be ahead because there isn't confusion internally in what they do. There won't be confusion externally in what they do. And there will be this sense of momentum and energy about the company and the feeling that you'll just see across social media channels and talking to the team that they may not feel in companies who aren't doing it. If you have recently merged with a company, if you've
yeah.
recently brought on new leaders, if you've launched new products, there's moments in time that make a lot of sense. You've never done it and you've been around for 17 years. Whatever that moment in time is for yourself, that's what I would probably focus on more and say, do it at the time that it makes sense for your business, but do it because that momentum and energy and drive that comes out of it, you can feel it across the board, internally and externally, in such a positive way.
I love that. I think that's a great call to action to close on. And just to repeat your words, get ahead. I mean, I don't know many business owners that don't want to get ahead, particularly after some of the grind that we've all come through from.
Yes,
And then avoid
exactly.
confusion, bring clarity to the team members so they can have that energy. Like that's a that's exciting, I think, for any team and for any team leader.
Yeah, it's an investment and growth mindset. And I'm an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, a founder, owner. I get it. It's hard when you're looking at the bottom line and top line slowing down, bottom line growing, whatever your numbers look like. it's stressful.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's cyclical. It's going to turn. You may not know when it's going to turn, but if you have that growth mindset and are willing to invest in what you believed in building and what your team believes in, and you as the leadership team or founder owner, it's almost like you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the team to make that investment. And again, it pays off in spades with that energy and excitement and clarity. Make it easy for people to know what you do and to buy from you. Make it easy for your team to sell what you do and have clients buy from you too, or hire talent. Either way, it's pretty critical.
It's super critical. And so if I sort of summarize on some of the points we've touched on, we talked heavily about purpose and your rising offering, which is awesome and is very tangible for all of your teams. We talked about driving better workplaces through family practices, what it is to be fractional for the individual team members, and how that can springboard them into different opportunities. I love the theme of entrepreneurship that's kind of threaded through this conversation, because I do think entrepreneurs and small teams are the innovators and can
Yes.
sort of lead the way on big change initiatives. And I particularly enjoyed the way you touched on IC stars and the opportunity to be reskilling and creating opportunities right at home in our communities. I think all of us, now that we're working in our teams in more remote or hybrid capacities, can do more in our communities. So that's super neat. Such a good conversation, Leslie. I think getting ahead is probably still my big takeaway
Yeah.
of a theme
Good.
that shines here. And
Yeah.
thank you for helping our listeners, get activated on how they may get ahead in the rest of 24.
Well, thank you for having me, Dane. And just thank you for all you're doing to make change. You reinvest and, through foundations and nonprofits and all of the things. And again, that's how we met each other originally. So thank you.
Where do people find you? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter? Where are your main places to be?
Best way is on LinkedIn. Just find Leslie Vickrey on LinkedIn, connect with me, reach out, and I'd love to continue a conversation. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.